Hello and welcome to another episode of Smart Freight Conversations, where we share interesting and important updates about freight decarbonization and the drive towards a zero-emissions logistics industry. I'm Andy Golding, Head of Academy here at Smart Freight Center, or SFC, as you'll hear us call it, and I'm your host for today. Today is part one of a two-part series exploring market trends in road freight electrification. Joining me for this two-part series is my colleague and Senior Technical Manager here at Smart Freight Center, Tharsis Teoh. Tharsis, thank you for joining me. It is great to do this with you.
Again,
Here we are. Yes. Yeah. Tharsis is a repeat guest. So let's dive into this first episode. First episode, we're going to be looking at cost trends, charging infrastructure, some of the evergreen factors, and some of the barriers to adoption. Then we will move on to episode 2, where we'll start looking at some of the pros and cons, the trends, total cost of ownership, environmental benefits, and trade-offs. But
exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad that you find this topic exciting.
My everyday job.
I suppose it is your everyday.
Yeah.
So let's dive straight in then. If we're looking at the trends in road freight electrification, cost is probably a great trend to start off with. How are the purchase prices and the operating costs of electric trucks changing? And what does this mean for fleet operators today?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important questions. As you can imagine, most fleet operators, most businesses are very sensitive to costs. And cost is one, well, at least in the transport industry, they're extremely sensitive to anything that will affect their margins, which is quite thin. One of the most important metrics here, indicators that tell them whether, where the market is going, is this concept of the total cost of ownership. It's about the initial purchasing and investment costs and the operating costs over the lifetime of the vehicle. So that's something which has, which requires a bit of a nuanced discussion. But one thing I can say about the market itself is that the electric trucks that are coming in the market are better. They have better batteries, better driving range, lower energy consumption, and overall the market offering is a bit better. So the value proposition in the market is a bit better. Whereas when it comes to the topic of cost itself, it's still a bit high. It's still about 2 to 3 times higher than what a fleet operator would pay for a diesel truck. But many regions, many countries offer very substantial purchase incentives and tax incentives that help alleviate that cost. So that's a good thing. On the operating cost side, I think the most important question is, at this point, is the extent to which, or the scale of the dependence on public charging and the cost of that. Public charging costs can vary quite a bit. So if a fleet operator wants to take control of their costs, they should be very smart about how much reliance they have on public charging, and try to control or limit that, and rely instead on depot charging, where they have a bit more control and they can control the costs.
Fair enough. So if we're trying to control the costs, obviously, I think you've hit on something very important, and we will talk a little bit about barriers a bit later in this episode, but the startup costs for transitioning to electric vehicles are significant, but you have also just said that the value proposition and the value offering of these vehicles is steadily increasing, and we're seeing a lot of opportunities for assistance coming in from governments, policymakers, etc., which I think is a great step in the right direction.
Exactly.
If we then, and you just finished off by talking about charging infrastructure and operators having to be very strategic about how they charge, let's look at that charging infrastructure. What is the current state of high-capacity charging stations for heavy-duty road freight, and what are some of the major gaps that we're seeing?
Yeah. Well, high-capacity charging is crucial, especially for long-haul routes. And we're talking about a minimum of 350 kilowatts, which is about the limit for passenger cars. Ideally, we will need something in the range of what people call megawatt charging, which is actually upwards from 750 kilowatts to 1 megawatt plus, right? Right now, we don't see enough infrastructure to support long-haul transport everywhere, but we do see some on certain corridors. And I think that's important. So identifying which corridors exactly have the charging infrastructure that supports the transport operation is crucial for fleet operators at this point. That said, we see at least in Europe, targets set by governments as well as funding made available to fill some of these gaps. Progress in the US is a bit slower, but there is a national strategy which helps direct private investments to the right corridors for placement. So so where are the gaps? We're still in the early days, but it's also important to remember that for the short and medium term, fleet electrification ideally should focus on short and regional transport operations, which depend primarily on depot charging. So in terms of whether this is a major hurdle, I don't think so. But it is something that we have to keep an eye on as we go closer to 2030 and beyond.
So I think we know this is a developing story. The whole road freight electrification, fleet electrification, electric trucks conversation is a developing story.
Yeah.
It's great that there is positive movement. So we are seeing long haul routes being established in certain corridors where it is feasible. But I also think that what you ended off with there is really important, that just because we can't necessarily do long haul routes everywhere doesn't mean that there isn't a serious business case for electrifying in shorter regional routes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's really good to hear. So on that positive note, let's look at some of the evergreen factors. So what are some of the long-term market and regulatory trends that you're seeing that are making fleet electrification in road freight inevitable?
Yeah. Inevitable is a strong word, but we are at the beginning of the transition. To me, it feels like we're only on the third step of a 10-story staircase. No, we're really, really, really at the beginning. And for the freight sector to fully decarbonize, we need both the market and regulators to play their role smartly and coordinate. To me, this means for the industry, and this is what we see happening now. Manufacturers, public authorities, we're all experimenting with the best way to help the transition move forward. We need to experiment, we need to build capacity, we need to standardize processes. And I think one of the most important trends that we see as well in, say, talking about regulatory trends is building a comprehensive policy framework that helps guide the industry in the right direction. And I think we can talk about that a bit more as well a bit later. But one success is both the California Advanced Clean Truck Regulation and the European CO2 HGV standard, which has been shown to correlate with a wider availability of electric truck models, as well as downward pressure on prices. So this is probably like the most basic and most important type of legislation that sets the industry in the right direction.
And I mean, you started off saying that we are on step 3 of it. We're on the third story or the third step of a 10-story building. We're at the beginning of a long but important journey. But it is also nice to see that there are these clear policies coming together. There are clear frameworks coming together. So does it feel to you that even though we're at the beginning of this journey, we are moving forward in the right direction?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we have to remember that this is a kind of a socio-technical transition. It's not just technology, it's not just a product. It's about people, their operations, their livelihoods. So what I think is really important is that there is a direction set, and we find the best way to move forward. From our understanding, it's good if we have, if we see the same things, if we have the same vision, and we cooperate a little. But it's open, and so I think from what I see from both shippers, from carriers, from LSPs in between, from ecosystem players, there is like there's a vision, a common vision that they see, and a general drive in the right direction.
A general drive in the right direction. I love that pun. I don't know if it was intentional, but I do hope that it was.
I think drive is a very common word that's used in the e-trucking business. Yeah.
So we're talking about the socio-technical change, the fact that this is people.
Yeah.
We're asking people to shift. There will be an impact on a lot of people in this process. We've looked at the charging infrastructure, the cost trends, some of the factors affecting how this transition is happening. What about some of the adoption barriers? So what are some of the most significant hurdles, like technology-wise, finance-wise, operation-wise, that are preventing large-scale adoption in freight fleets?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a broad question. I think if we talk about challenges and hurdles, we can talk for a long time. In my mind, the biggest hurdle is the need for coordinated, almost simultaneous decisions made by different actors at the same time that cuts across technical, operational, financial challenges. So I think we're stuck in a bit of like a vicious cycle or a bit of a stalemate. The demand for electric freight services depends on price. Or shippers are also sensitive to logistics costs, which in turn depends on whether a fleet operator can operate at total cost that's competitive with the current diesel trucking business. So that demand is dependent on both these actors, but also dependent on the ecosystem, on the manufacturers and the charging infrastructure providers. And they are also hesitant to scale up unless they see a clear demand. So all four actors, and these are just the four actors, there are other actors in play. All four actors are sort of just waiting for each other to move forward. So I think this is the big challenge, like reducing the risk of just one actor being in the front and getting burned is the big challenge that we need to solve. I think at the ecosystem level, this is a big question. Do we slowly move forward? Do we unravel the knot slowly, or do we cut the knot directly and just break everything apart and build from scratch? I think we don't want to do that because it's dangerous. So for fleet operators, they probably and everyone on the ground, they will probably have to move very slowly and cautiously, but push boundaries, experiment with their suppliers, experiment with their customers, and create deep partnerships to serve their mutual interests. And organizations like the Fleet Electrification Coalition and other NGOs that play this role are helping to bring the right players from finance to policy as well to the table to discuss what we can do together and how we can coordinate our actions. We don't have to have deep collaborations all the time, but we should realize what the others do and sort of like move without opposing each other.
And I think that what you said there is very important, that we need these neutral parties and these organizations that can bring all of the actors to the table, like the Fleet Electrification Coalition, where we can create the space for everybody to come to the table, have the conversation, and figure out how do we move forward productively and in a way that is beneficial for us and for everyone in the long term.
Yeah, exactly.
So on that, as we come to a wrap for the first episode of this two-part series, if we start looking from planning towards action, for a fleet manager that is just starting the electrification journey, what are the first concrete steps to take?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I pity this guy. It's a very big undertaking. Fleet replacement, fleet transition decisions isn't an operational one. It's not about buying another truck. It's a strategic one that can redefine your entire business, right? So the fleet manager should have a sponsor, a project sponsor that's of sufficient seniority to help push this entire transition through. I think, and some of our publications show, the most important thing is to get the company internally aligned on what electrification outcome should be and what the process of electrification will be. just make sure everyone's really, the expectations are sort of aligned there. And this requires a lot of learning and discussing by the operations team, but also sharing that with the broader team, procurement, finance, sustainability managers, and the like. And putting the first step, therefore, is to really put a strong core team from multiple departments where you're all aligned and they have their targets, the processes aligned, the targets are aligned, and that's also implemented in some sort of management tool, like setting KPIs for the individual roles. This ensures that, this is not just a pet project by one person, but this is a step that the entire company needs to take together.
And I think that's no fleet manager can accomplish this alone. This is a company-wide or at least a cross-functional decision-making or undertaking that needs to happen. So that you've spoken about the need for sponsorship from upper management or even C-suite that needs to come. We need that internal alignment of why are we doing this and what are we hoping to achieve. That cross-functional team that is taking part in this project, and critically that there has to be some level of accountability to this, like KPIs, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
Tharsis, I think that we will end episode 1 there. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Smart Freight Conversations. Don't forget to join us for episode 2 of this series exploring market trends in road freight electrification.
Thank you.